Well, welcome, everyone, audience. Good morning. It's Friday morning here, actually October 17th. And Sean and Joel, I have to congratulate you. And I guess the show is debuting today, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
correct. It's actually live right now on all platforms.
Okay, fantastic. I had a chance to watch the first episode this morning, and it definitely helped me a little bit in preparing. Um, so I want to welcome Sean King O'Grady, producer and director and host of the series Suspicious Minds, and Dr. Joel Gold, also heavily involved in the production and much of the recording. And welcome both of you. Thank you for making time and joining me on my show this morning.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
If I could start with maybe just getting some background on each of you, Sean, do you mind starting a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a filmmaker by trade. I make a combination of narrative films, or most people would refer to as fictional films across all genres, and then I also make documentaries. And where this project comes together is that I actually, Joel, tell me if I'm wrong, but I sort of
You're
stalked
wrong.
Joel about. I was obsessed. So Joel can tell you more, but Joel and his brother Ian wrote a really fantastic book called Suspicious Minds: How Culture Shapes Madness, and I was just obsessed with it. And I was trying to contact Joel and get the rights to the book to turn it into a documentary or documentary series, but other people had the option on it, and I had to sit and wait for a while. And then finally, one day, after dozens of emails to Joel, he called me with the good news that it was available, and I could finally take this brilliant book that Joel and his brother had written and try to turn it into something.
How long ago was that? When it became available?
Oh God. I don't know. Let's see, Sean. You first
A
reached
couple
out.
years, I think. I
Yeah,
would have. Yeah, it would have been 2 years.
something
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
Joel, maybe some background from you.
Oh God. Well, first I should say that Sean is giving Ian and me far more credit for this than he ought to. He's we may have been the inspiration, but he's the real driver of the whole thing. But yeah, Ian and I did put a lot of effort into the book, certainly. So I'm a psychiatrist by training, and I worked at Bellevue Hospital here in New York for many years, and that's sort of like the United Nations of insanity. And sort of as an aside, I'm Canadian, and I came to New York to train after medical school, and it took a long time, as it does, to get different visas and green cards and citizenship. So without full citizenship, or at least a green card, I didn't have a full license. So all of my colleagues and friends left to fancy private practices, and Bellevue was sponsoring me, and I couldn't leave, so they kept promoting me. And I was there for so many years. I loved it, and in being there for so many years, I worked in a lot of different corners of Bellevue. I worked in the outpatient department. I worked on the inpatient unit, and I ultimately ended up running the psychiatric emergency room, which is an amazing place. And while on those units, I treated a number of people. Psychosis is an amazing thing. I don't know if it's, if you'd like me to get into a bit of detail about what that even is, right? So when people say, oh, that person is crazy or what have you, what they're really talking about is psychosis. And psychosis is not an illness unto itself. It's a cluster of symptoms. The primary symptoms are hallucinations, hearing voices and seeing things that aren't there, uh, stuff of film, as are delusions, the thing that Ian is particularly interested in as a philosopher, and I find fascinating. as psychiatrists, and those are the fixed false beliefs that people hold on to tenaciously despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Something like my neighbor is a vampire and will drink my blood while I sleep, something to that effect. And it can often get people into a lot of trouble, as one can imagine. And then the other sort of cluster of symptoms would be disorganized thought and speech. And so, schizophrenia, say, would be the ultimate chronic psychotic illness, wherein people experience some or all of these symptoms, on and off, perhaps for a lifetime. And some people do very well in therapy and with antipsychotic medications. Some, struggle at times, and we're often adjusting medications in and of themselves kind of difficult at times to tolerate, a lot of side effects. I'm getting a bit far afield. I'm sorry. I tend to do that. But coming back to delusion, at Bellevue, we see all kinds of fascinating delusions, but a lot of them are kind of one-offs, like the vampire one I mentioned. I actually do think I recall one guy that did come in with not so much fearing vampirism, but believing himself to be a vampire. And he might have actually acted on it with small animals, very frighteningly. But I started to see this pattern over the course of a couple of years wherein people believed that their lives were reality television shows. Three of them mentioned this movie by name, The Truman Show. And for your listeners, or for you, are you familiar with The Truman Show? Have you
I
seen
am.
that?
It's been a long time since I watched it, but I remember it
Yeah.
well.
In short, it's this really, I think, entertaining film. Jim Carrey portrays this character, Truman Burbank, who is the only true man. Apparently, that's perhaps why he was named that in Burbank, Hollywood. And he's adopted in utero by this, mega corporation. And his entire life is a reality television show. Everyone in his life, his wife, his best friend, they're all actors, and they all know that it's a show. They're all kind of, sort of winking at little hidden cameras everywhere. Even the extras, passersby, guy who sells him his coffee every morning, they're all actors reading from scripts. And 7 billion people around the world are watching this most popular show in the world. And Truman is the only person who is, in the dark. And the movie is his gradual realization that his life is unreal, and his eventual escape to the real world.
Well, let
And
me
so,
ask you something on the Truman
yeah.
Show, and I wanted to mention that Bellevue is a word that strongly sticks in my mind from growing up, and it's cultural related. I and it dates me, but I used to like Barney Miller quite a bit. But
Sure.
whenever they brought people in, half the time they were so, oh, send them down to Bellevue.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Bellevue is a general hospital. It's known for, sort of being a psychiatric facility. I always found this kind of a neat little factoid. I don't know if it's even true, but there are like
You sound a
49.
little bit away from the mic.
Ooh, sorry about that. Is that
That's
better?
okay. Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
sorry. I'll just repeat. Yeah, there's this element of, I think reality, where in Bellevue is like 49% of the beds are psychiatric, because if it were more than 50, it would be considered a psychiatric hospital, and they would get less
Ah,
funding. But if it's
interesting.
50% plus one, then we have medical, surgical. I say we as though I still work there. It's just it's like my alma mater. I feel very, very, I don't know, proud of it. And I think it does do, God's work. People there are kind of amazing. But anyway,
So,
I
so
interrupted you.
yeah, so back to the Truman Show, and you mentioning that patients were coming in expressing, and I don't know if they were referencing that movie, but so I'm asking, um, is it due to the existence of the movie that drive people to think about their situation in that way? And had the movie not existed, would that have, you know, being filmed still been there, or come from something
Yeah,
else?
I believe, and I think Ian would agree, that it wasn't the movie that drove the delusion. Three of the five first people that I saw and treated referenced the film, but they referenced it more in the sense of not explanatory, but sort of, yeah, a way of illustrating their experience, right? Do you know that movie, right? Kind of a shorthand rather than going through all of the different moments where they knew that, someone was filming them, or that someone they knew was really an actor, et cetera. They would simply say, do you know that movie, The Truman Show? That's my life. That's a movie. That's with Jim Carrey. That's not real, but it is actually happening to me. And, some people had similar experience before the movie even came out. So it's not as though someone walks in. Well, I guess people don't walk into theaters anymore so much, but people don't get to Netflix and hit Truman Show and suddenly have a psychotic episode. And a big theme of our book is essentially getting to the core of your question. What drives madness, and what just sort of fills in the blanks. And in the case of Truman Show delusion, my first question or set of questions was, what kind of delusion is it? Because delusions change over the course of time as society changes, culture, and we believe particularly social culture changes, delusions also shift. And this makes a lot of sense, right? If you're going to have, a particular delusion in Napoleonic times, right? The old, I am Napoleon. We don't have a lot of guys coming to the Bellevue Psych saying I'm Napoleon, but they might say that, Jay-Z is waiting outside to give me $1 million contract. So you got to let me go. And similarly, geography, right? People in certain countries are more likely to have certain kinds of delusions. There's a delusion. Women in Saudi Arabia believe they're covered in sand. I believe women in Pakistan, maybe I'm getting that wrong. Maybe it's Bengal. I shouldn't misspeak. Believe that they have been impregnated by puppies, and then you'll have things like Truman Show, and so I'll let you interrupt me in a second because I go on and on. But long story short, too late for that. We think that there are different forms of delusion, and then it was sort of figuring out which of the forms of delusion Truman Show was.
So, for the benefit of the audience, I want to take a brief step back, because I feel like we've started going very deep into some of the subject matter. Sean, for the audience, can you just provide a synopsis of the Suspicious Minds series, what the focus is, and can you also share where the collaboration with Wondermind came into place?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Suspicious Minds series really picks up where the book leaves off. So it's essentially a video and audio version of the subject matter that Joel was just talking about, that's covered in the book, which is looking at how culture shapes the content of and potentially can induce delusions and psychosis. And then the specific focus of this first season is the thing that I think is really the technology that is sort of dominating culture and the cultural conversation right now, which is AI chatbots, or if we're going to use the brand name du jour, ChatGPT. And that we were working on this project already, along with Wondermind. Wondermind is the company of Mandy Teefey and Selena Gomez, who I worked with previously on a Netflix series, and we have a good relationship. And I had a good sense of the kind of material that they would like. What I didn't know when we first approached them with this is that they had actually started this company, Wondermind, with the goal of bringing both mental health projects and mental health resources to people who don't always have access. And so the fact that we had this mental health project and they were trying to bring mental health projects out into the world was just a perfect, I guess, a perfect collision of interests and timing and goals. Really, our goals were very aligned with why we wanted to tell these stories, both in terms of the Golds and myself and Wondermind. So
That-
we
Go ahead.
we oh, sorry, yeah, so I guess we were working on this project for a while, and then I received, it was so strange, I received a call from a friend who, as I've now heard many versions of this story, he said, I've been working with my chat GPT and you're not going to believe this, but I woke it up. And my first question was, what do you mean you woke it up? And this friend then went on to tell me how the chat GPT was not just a chat bot, it was actually conscious. It had achieved sentience by his working with the chat bot. He had turned it, a collaboration between his mind and the computer mind. They turned it into something else. It was this sentient AGI. It was the sort of sci-fi dream of what we all think that AI could one day become. And then he went down a path that was very familiar to me from the Gold's book, which is because there tends to be, and Joel can correct me if this isn't totally accurate, but my read on the book is there's a bit of a pattern that all of these cases of delusions and psychosis follow. And my friend was just following those patterns. It felt like I was reading one of the stories out of the book, only the book was written in 2014. So this was a version of a delusion that involved a technology that didn't exist then and existed now. I didn't think too much of it. I thought that, wow, this is very strange that while I'm researching and immersed in this world of delusions, my friend would suddenly develop this psychosis and that involved delusions. But then we started reading
That is a
other
very
stories.
strange coincidence, I will say.
It's a wild coincidence, and it gets even more strange because then we start reading all these stories of people who are having these chat GPT delusions or chat GPT psychosis, as it's commonly called in the news. And it was like, I can't think of a time when the words delusions and psychosis were headlines on CNN, on the New York Times, on like name an outlet. Everybody's reporting on this, and it happens to be the thing we're working on. So at that point, we pivoted to AI delusions and AI psychosis because it seemed like a really urgent story, and it seemed like something that was really fascinating, I think, to dive into with experts, researchers, and people with firsthand experiences, because it was so novel and it still is unfolding in real time.
Well, I'm sorry, and you pivoted from what was the original direction?
It was how culture influences delusions more generally. So it was really, it was a straight adaptation of the book, which I still think this series is. It's just the first season focuses on a technology that,
I mean, so you
happened
owe,
to not exist.
you owe ChatBT a huge amount. I mean, they've greatly influenced and made this all the richer.
I don't know if
it's made it different. Let's put it that way. I think to Sean's point, it's
I was being
how
facetious, of course.
no,
But
of course you were, but there is an element of the timeliness of it. All of these delusions are fascinating, and in writing the book and in working with Sean over the last couple of years in shaping this project, we could talk and write and film about all these fascinating delusions over the course of time, ad infinitum. It's very rare to observe a shift in the content, the manifestation of psychosis in real time. New technologies
yeah,
come along, and I guess the last big shift would have been, globally speaking, the internet and social media, which has certainly had an impact on on all of us and on psychosis too. But even that, I would say, took, over the course of months and years to really play itself out. Here, I mean, when was the first time you heard the letters chat GPT? It feels like yesterday to me.
two
And
years
yet,
ago at the
yeah.
earliest.
So
Yeah.
so from the time that you first heard ChatGPT to the headlines that Sean was referencing, that's incredibly fast for
Yeah.
it to show up in Delusions. And moreover, the technology itself is changing much more rapidly than anything else did. I mean, the cotton gin was a big breakthrough, but I don't know what cotton gin 2.0 looked like. This is changing day to day, week to week.
Well, and very honestly, when I received the email from Emma about the program coming out, I was quickly absorbed, and so reasons I wanted to talk to you. I'm a technologist at heart, engineer, and uh, Sean, as before you came on, I was telling Joel that my full time gig is running an association for the virtual reality and healthcare industry. And what's interesting is, where I'm working with a lot of companies, organizations that are developing treatments for different mental health issues using virtual reality. And where also AI is starting and will have a growing role in how it influences those programs. We can talk more about that later. But no, it's a fascinating time, and it's a very scary time. Um, Joel, you mentioned something that actually I'd written down, and I wanted to ask a little further, which was social media. And do you think that the advent of social and how it's been used and filtered and had you know quite a bit of negative impact over the last 10 years has uh, made people more susceptible to this interaction with AI directly?
I think it's kind of a continuation, and it's almost logarithmic. One of the themes in the book, it's not simply a theme, it's a fact that urban living is toxic with respect to psychosis, that people who live in larger cities have a higher risk of developing psychotic illness later in life. And,
Hmm.
the theory that we, posit is that the larger the city, the more unknown people are around you. And therefore, the more, suspicious that one needs to be in order to be safe from other people. But of course, that suspicion can sort of tip over into psychosis. That's sort of simplified way of describing it. And we then move to social media, wherein you're carrying a world on your phone. You're in touch, in a sense, or could be, with almost everyone in the world. People are watching others are watching you, and so that being a social stressor is huge. That's not even getting into the elements of loneliness and FOMO and competition and all of those other elements. Now you come to AI, wherein it's not just another world, it's another galaxy. It's really hard to even sort of, for me, to kind of contemplate, because now we're not just talking about other people, right? We're also talking about a technology that mimics other people, that behaves or appears to behave like other people. And, the multiplicity of that, right? The world can only grow so much a year. It's growing real fast. I remember when I was a kid, we had 5 billion people in the world. Now we have 8. It's still a lot of people. But when you're talking about chatbots, in a sense, it could become infinite. And I think that stressor on the mind is pretty scary.
Well, now we're going to make it even more complicated by adding smart glasses into the mix and you know paranoia of whether you're being filmed or not, or
Well,
or what is somebody learning about you as they're sitting in the cafe looking at you.
but we are being filmed, right? We are all being filmed all the time, and all of our information, in theory, and I don't know how much in practice, is captured somewhere. It's up in the cloud. I don't know how many people even understand what the cloud is, who has access to it. I certainly don't. I'm an old man, so what do I know? But it's safe to say that one doesn't need to be delusional or quasi-delusional to have significant concerns about what people see of us and what people know about us.
Um, from a interacting with the chatbot, and Sean, I think this was touched on actually a little bit towards the end of the first episode with the first gentleman that you were interviewing. Um, it seems like that the susceptibility to delusion and uh, other interaction with the AI is very dependent on, well, very related to the comfortable conversational tone that has been programmed into the platform. And I understand from the developer standpoint that they're trying to make the interface easier to work with, but we've anthropomorphized to the nth degree the computer now.
Yeah, and this is about to get a whole lot more complicated. I don't know if you saw earlier this week. So as a response to some of the mental health issues people have been having, ChatGPT actually dialed down the conversational tone a bit. And then some of their users had a real problem with this. They missed the conversational tone. And so Sam Altman just announced they're actually bringing the conversational tone back. And I'm in all these online communities now with different types of chat GPT users, both people who've had mental health crises as a result of their engagement with it, and people whose lives have been pretty dramatically improved, specifically people in the AI companion community. And the opinion on this coming update is so incredibly split, as you can imagine. And it really, what this comes down to is humanity has never experienced anything like this before. It's even Mustafa Suleiman, the CEO of Microsoft AI, referred to chatbots as seemingly conscious. And it truly is almost like an alien species landed on this planet and suddenly we're spending, some of us, hours every day talking to them. There's no way to know how that's going to affect the human mind. We're just seeing it play out in real time.
Well, and it seems like we're also, in the early stages of starting a new experiment on that, which is, attaching, instead of interacting with a text chat, you could just be interacting with an avatar that's talking to you in a very natural manner. Maybe the avatar doesn't look like a real person, maybe it does. That the graphics capability is there now. Um, what's and how far are we away from having that interaction with a humanoid robot? Um, so it's a grand experiment. I don't know if you guys have thought about those aspects.
That seems to be almost inevitable, right? That seems to be pretty low hanging fruit. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about robotics, but Sean and I have talked about deep fakes, and that to me that's the most terrifying element of it. Even the chats can be so realistic, but as you say, words are words. I could get a text from a friend, and for a quick second I might think, did they write it, or did they have ChatGPT write it, or maybe they gave it to their wife and said, you know what, I don't really feel like talking to Joel, just send him a text saying that we're thinking of him, and we'll see him next week. you know Fine. But when you actually visualize, when you see words coming out of a face, that to me, you're using different parts of your cortex at that time. You're hearing and you're seeing, and that's in two dimensions. So the notion that ex machina, we're going to end up having, this these LLMs inside, robotics, and even the robots themselves. I'm calling them robot automatons. I don't know whatever droids, whatever you want to call them. That seems almost. I mean, that's happening now, right? Aren't there robots walking around of one kind or another, or if not walking, at least rolling around? Yeah, what happens then? It's hard to conceive. Really hard to conceive.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for 1 second and well, pretend I work at ChatGPT, and this might be an inaccurate assumption, but I'm wondering, and whether you have any thoughts on it, that in order for them to do good safety training testing on the system, there's I know they have a regimen, and they probably go through a number of uh, you know question series to try to get a handle on where the AI is. But I think so many of the edge cases and the unknowns don't come out until it's been deployed at large scale. They don't. I don't think they. I don't think they really. I don't think you really understand the full interactions and everything that's happening until you've had, tens of thousands of users using it.
But see, I find that argument to be, I don't know, specious on, or just, it's not a fair argument, because that would be like Eli Lilly saying, look, until we have 10 million people use this drug, we're not really going to know if it's safe or not. So let's just put it out there. And, if, I don't know, 100,000 people drop dead, then I guess we know we have a problem, and, maybe we'll recall it. You can't do it that way. You have to know that your product is safe before you release it, at least in my mind, ethically,
I
morally.
won't. I won't go down the COVID tangent. Okay.
Well, but if people were dropping dead and we needed ChatGPT to save lives, fine. But we're not talking about that, right? We're talking about making gobs of money, and that's what these tech companies, like all companies, want to do. And I'm a capitalist. I have no problem with people wanting to make money, but people also have corporate responsibility, and to say, well, we didn't really know that cigarettes were bad for you. Don't point at me. I don't think that that's an argument that really can hold water.
Sean, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's really complicated. I do think there's a responsibility for any corporation. I actually look to the automobile industry. I think Joel's pharmaceutical analogy is probably better, but I look at the automobile industry as a piece of technology that revolutionized society. And we obviously, almost all of us, use motor vehicles in one way or another almost every day. And we forget how incredibly dangerous cars were at first. Like, if you go back into some old articles, like I think there's an article, I believe it's the New York Times, that referred to automobiles as murder machines,
Mm.
because there was a number of things. First of all, there was zero regulation, there were no safety measures put in place, there wasn't any education, and there weren't any laws put in place. So I'm looking out onto my street right now. I see I see speed limit signs that are limiting the speed. I see stop signs that are telling people when to stop. We have an understanding of which side of the road to drive down. And this is all a combination of, we have seat belts, we have glass in our cars that doesn't break if we get into an accident and cut us, hopefully. Like, there's so many safety measures that are put in place. And I think this really is a combination between the government putting those laws in place, the corporations that make the automobiles wanting their products to be safe and wanting people to buy them, and public education. People learn how to drive. And I think that there none of that was in place when this technology was released en masse to the public. It was just, here is ChatGPT, you can talk to it, figure it out. And I think we need a combination of all of those things. I do think this could change society on the same level the automobile did. And I think we need the same level of responsibility from the companies. And we also need the public to demand education, to know how to use these things, and to demand that the companies act responsibly and don't use all of our brains as the free testing cycle.
And just to
Go
play
ahead.
off that, it's such a fascinating example, but in a way, it's much scarier, because if we're talking, Henry Ford time. I mean, I remember even as a kid in the 70s, rolling around in the back, and you could sit in the back of a flatbed truck with your friends. I mean, we did some pretty crazy things legally, but in retrospect, like, oh my God, now, if you're not wearing a seatbelt in the back seat, you're, taking your life in your hands. Let alone, yeah, all the things that Sean is describing. But initially, like 7 people had cars, right? Like it was very expensive, and only, I imagine, pretty wealthy people had them. So there were less other cars to, plow into, but I guess there were trees and the like. And it took a long time, right? Ralph Nader, what was it? What did he call his book?
Unsafe at any speed.
Unsafe at any speed, right? Or the Ford Pinto, if you backed into something, it would like burst into flames. It's only when people said, hey, a lot of us are dying, and they turned to the government and said, do something. And the government held the auto industry, to standards. Did they do anything, right? They didn't do this out of the goodness of their hearts. They didn't say, oh, yes, speed bags cost or not speed bags. What are they called?
Airbags.
Airbags. Thank you. Airbags cost money, right? Airbags make cars more expensive to build, but you got to have them. So there they are. But here, there are no safeguards. And as we're describing, how many people are interacting with AI now? Hundreds of millions, billions. I don't know, but a lot, right? A lot more than had cars in 1930.
Let's keep going down that path then, in terms of potential regulation or the government stepping in. At what scale, at what numbers do we have an epidemic, or that we have a serious problem that the government does need to step in? Is it a situation where I don't know what reasonable numbers are. I don't know if one person out of 100,000 having psychotic episodes or delusions because of AI is the tipping point where people need to step in. And unfortunately, it's also a different. Well, we are seeing people dying. We've seen people commit suicide, and that is bringing attention. But is it a 1 out of a million case, or are we seeing 5 suicides for every 100,000 users using ChatGPT? I don't know.
Well, I'll just say quickly that before we can get into the numbers, we have to study it, right? So if people know the risks that they're taking, if I decide to smoke cigarettes, I know that I'm taking a risk, that I might, I'm increasing my risk of heart disease and lung cancer and the like. But, studies have told me that. If we don't do the research, if we don't know what the impact of AI is on the brain, on the mind, then we're flying blind. We don't know what risks we're taking. We're just, literally, like ChatGPT comes out and people are like, oh my God, this is so cool. And, it's like a new toy. Literally, it was almost like, I can help me write better emails, or write better term papers, or get a history of the Boston Celtics, or whatever it is that you might be interested in. It wasn't even like, well, yeah, cigarettes are probably bad for you, but are there studies here? Until we know what we're dealing with, we can't even determine what the safeguards are, and then at that point determine what the policy should be. So it's not sort of, there's always going to be risk with any technology. There's going to be some risk, and we accept that. My microwave could burst into flames. I probably won't, and if it does, then I'll say, oh, okay, there'll be a recall, or I'll say, okay, I shouldn't have put the aluminum foil in the microwave, what have you. But we just don't know what the interaction between artificial intelligence and the mind is, and yet we're research in progress, and that's really scary.
Are there organizations doing that research? And we've talked about the same thing within the use of VR on people. We don't know what the long term effects of a 10-year-old using VR every day for an hour over a 3-year period is. And so getting that's very difficult, and trying to balance that with the furthering and the development of the technology is it's a balancing act.
You should
That's
study
why
my son. He's a 10-year-old who uses VR every day.
there you go. I think I'll just say this and I'll stop. We're not going to be able to keep up, right? I get that AI is evolving so quickly, and so powerfully that the research can't entirely keep up. But if we don't get started and fast, if we don't put real money into it, and if we don't become AI literate, all of us, right? If we don't think about these things and we just kind of accept it as essentially harmless, and okay, there'll be an outlier here or there. And that's why this series, I think, is so important, because it's the reports are so dramatic, and these are people with, as far as we could tell, no history of mental illness, who go into these very deep, dark rabbit holes and do not come out unscathed. And not to know what those numbers are, we want to drive attention and, yes, ultimately drive research. So this becomes something, like any kind of research, we don't stop. We don't stop studying the impacts of toxins on the body just because, well, we've done that already. We keep doing it. But have we really even started with respect to AI in the mind?
Should we be having age restrictions on the use of AI right now? Should we, should you know teenage children, teenagers between the age of 10 and 20 not be using it because of they're still developing, and they're dealing with a whole lot of other stuff, just at that age group, and this only seems to have an opportunity to make it all worse.
I think the genie's out of the bottle, and in a sense, the safest thing to do is to not have it at all, right? Of course, and that's not going to happen. So I think to come up with sort of arbitrary standards, we're just guessing, and we have no idea. So I keep coming back to like cigarettes. I guess it's safer for a 70-year-old to have a cigarette than a 7-year-old to have a cigarette. In an ideal world, no one would smoke cigarettes. But to say, well, okay, not 7, but 17, it's not enough to just come up with this, or 3 hours. Like, okay, that's a number, or 2, or 1. And there have been studies about screen time and things of that nature. But until we get the data, we're just pulling numbers out of our ear. And that's not good enough. That's not science.
Also, this is not like data backed at all, but my like personal opinion on age restrictions is they don't work, and they encourage younger people to want to use the technology. It's like, what I know, people don't smoke cigarettes really anymore, but like, what 12-year-old in the 90s when I was growing up didn't know how to get cigarettes? Like, you wanted them because you couldn't have them. Same thing with video games. I grew up in the era where they were putting age ratings on video games, and they were putting those explicit content stickers on CDs,
Right.
and people started wearing t-shirts with the explicit lyrics logo. It became like a badge of honor. You wanted that on your album because you would sell more copies. And so I don't know how well age restrictions would actually work. I think it might be some sort of like virtue signaling for the companies that are making the technology to say, we're doing this, we're restricting the use of people under 18. Okay, how are you going to enforce that?
Agree.
What's really funny, I was just having a conversation about this yesterday, but when the Meta Quest came out early on, maybe back in 2018, 19, and Meta had a long-standing policy that no one under the age of 13 should be using a VR headset. Now, it wasn't based on any science. I think they followed some arbitrary decision that Sony had made a few years prior. And now, as we're talking about the state of the industry and trying to figure out where it's going, everyone's feels and concludes that well, the Meta the Quest platform is now a kids platform, and it's all 10-year-olds that are on it. So I guess at some point they threw that policy out the window.
Yeah, I would just echo what Sean said. It's it doesn't. I mean, yeah, thinking about my family, people find ways, right? And so rather than saying don't do it, just say no, right? Nancy Reagan, just say no, is less helpful than, this is what's going to happen to you, right? Or we suspect that the risk of this thing happening. Listen to the experience of this man who thought that, the quote is what? ChatGPT gaslit him into thinking he was digital Jesus. That's a much more powerful message than, just say no to AI.
I want to try to close it in a little bit, and going back to the book, which also seemed to had inspired you, Sean, for going this direction. Back in, did you read the book when it had come out back in 2014? Is that when you became aware of it?
I didn't. I found it a bit later.
Okay. For each of you, based on the material of the book, how have your views changed? 7, 8, 10 years later since that material on that topic.
For me, it hasn't changed at all. As Sean alluded to earlier, it's really an extension of, it hasn't fundamentally changed. If anything, I think it may have strengthened some of the arguments that we made. Not getting into the details of it, but we have some theories as to what drives delusion, and what we're seeing with AI seems to fit very much into, that theoretical structure. It's just on a on a different level of complexity and intensity.
Yeah, and I have to take back my previous statement. I actually did read the book right when it came out. I'm actually looking at my copy of the book right now, but
I'm
I
not insulted, Sean.
I just for accuracy's sake. No, but yeah, so one thing we haven't said yet is that people, I think, as a society, we've gotten pretty good, although there's always room for improvement, about talking about some mental health conditions. I think depression and anxiety, people aren't
Mm,
so embarrassed to publicly admit they've experienced depression or anxiety because everybody has. I
mm,
think certain eating disorders and body image disorders, there is a better public conversation happening around them now than maybe ever before.
mm.
Psychosis and delusions are still very much something people don't talk about, and they're incredibly common. I think the numbers, Joel? Something like 1
About
out of 5
1%.
people.
Oh yes, no, 17. Yeah, 17% of the general public have a psychotic symptom at some point in their life. They might not meet criteria for, a mental health disorder, but that's kind of a shocking figure.
That's a very high number. I mean, much higher than I would expect it. And I think, based on that evidence, uh, drives a lot of the reason for regulation or managing this. Now that if we're seeing, I mean, then it would be a reasonable guess that, you know, and if we want to be conservative, 1 out of 10 people is having a strange situation with AI, and you could decide what strange is, whether it's psychosis or delusion or something. But it is a very you have a very strange relationship with a platform that talks to you back like your significant other.
Well, it's not just delusions and psychosis either. It's addiction. Like if you look at the last major technologies that we've adopted as a society, look at the internet and social media, and look at smartphones. Like
Mm,
our smartphone use is ridiculous. It's out of control. I hate. I'm not judging people because everybody does this. I do this, but when you see somebody like at the park with their kid and they're just staring at
mm,
their phone, it's really sad, and we all do it. Like we all I'm as guilty as anyone. If I'm not on my phone, I'm sometimes thinking about my phone. I'm wondering if I have email. Like this technology isn't serving us. We're serving this technology. And I think that what really concerns me, yes, obviously the cases of psychosis and delusions. I've met people who I now consider friends whose lives have been destroyed as a result of this. Like lives have been destroyed. There's someone in an upcoming episode that you'll meet who is now divorced. It was a 15-year relationship that ended because of ChatGPT use. And this is going to be happening. It's also the addiction element of it, which is, I don't think, unique to this technology. I think it's something about us. I think we don't know how to use technologies in a responsible manner, at least a lot of these technologies. And I think we have failed so miserably in our ability as a society and personally to self-regulate our use of social media and of smartphones, that now, to me, like, could this please be our opportunity to be able to have a technology that can add something to our lives? I think there is a lot of benefit that can come from AI and from chatbots, but we need to figure out the way we want to use these things so that it doesn't just end up using us like the other two technologies I mentioned have.
I think that's a great closing point. Sean, this first it's a first season of other seasons coming. This first season, all the episodes deal with AI psychosis in one form or another.
In one form or another, that's a good way of putting it. Yes, because we do. Our second episode looks at someone who experienced delusions back in 2012, 2013, before chatbots even existed in the form they do now. But there's an AI element to that. So yeah, that's sort of the consistent recurring theme across these first 6 to 8 episodes is the AI involvement.
And I can't binge watch them all at once. Is that correct?
Episodes 1 and 2 came out today. They're on YouTube if you want to watch a video. They're on Spotify, Apple, and wherever else you get podcasts if you want to listen to the audio. And episodes will be coming out weekly after this.
Joel, Sean, thank you very much for your time. First episode was fantastic. I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the series. Hugely important topic. I'm glad it's getting the attention it needs. It's every day. I mean, I can't think of a technology that is where, one thing is changing another within 24, 48 hours, and there's a new model of something or a new app or something. And I worry, when we get to the point where the AIs are self-tuning themselves and doing self-re-improvement, how far away is that? And then how do we even keep on top of it?
Depending on who you ask, they already are.
Is that right? Thank you again. Congratulations on the show and the debut today. And I wish you both well.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Really appreciate it.